There comes a time in the life of every nation when a question rises, not from the parliament, not from the papers, but from the soul of the people. A question that asks, who are we? What do we stand for? And most importantly, where are we going? For India, that question has echoed for centuries. From the ashes of empires, from the chants of temples and the calls of mosques, from the hearts of those and bled for this land. And today, that question stands in front of 1.4 billion Indians. What does it mean to be Indian? For some, it means religion. For others, politics. But for one man, Narendra Modi, it means responsibility. He did not rise with comfort. He rose with conviction. He did not inherit power. He earned it step by step, breath by breath. That is how we achieved independence from the railway platforms of Vadnagar to the world stage of the United Nations. And behind his every word, his every silence, lies a belief that India is not just a country, it is a civilization. A civilization that has survived invaders, ideologies, and centuries of change. Because its roots are not in politics, but in faith, discipline, and unity. When Modi speaks of a Hindu Rashtra, he is not speaking of division. He is speaking of identity, of spiritual strength, of a nation that knows who it is, even when the world tries to tell it otherwise. He says, Hinduism is not a religion of temples. It is a religion of temperament. It is not about who you worship, but how you live. And this is where the debate begins. Is this religion or is this politics? Is this devotion or strategy? Is Modi building a nation of believers or a belief that can build a nation? For him, the answer is simple. It is not about creating Hindus. It is about creating humans who live by the values of Hindutva: truth, tolerance, courage, and compassion. Because religion can divide, but values unite. And when those values become the DNA of a country, that country becomes unstoppable. India today is not rising by policy alone. It is rising by mindset, by the belief that discipline is strength, that faith is power, that progress is a duty, not a choice. Modi's Hindu Rashtra is not a wall between communities. It is a mirror for the world. A vision that says we can be modern and still be rooted. That we can hold a smartphone in one hand and the Bhagavad Gita in the other, and still walk toward the same sunrise. That is not politics. That is philosophy in motion. That is India awakening, not against anyone, but for everyone. Because for Modi, leadership is not about being followed. It is about awakening followers into leaders. This vision, this Hindu Rashtra, is not built on temples of stone. It is built on temples of mindset, courage, and belief. And as he says again and again, that if 1.4 billion Indians decide to rise, no force on earth can make them fall. This is not just a statement. It is a call to action. A fire that never sleeps. A dream that refuses to die. And a man who refuses to stop because he believes that India's time has come. Every revolution has a root. Every vision has a seed, and the seed of Modi's vision was planted long before he wore a political badge. It was planted in the quiet lanes of Vadnagar. In the rhythm of prayers, in the discipline of dawn, and in the humility of work. He once said, when you live close to the earth, you understand the strength of the roots. That is where his journey began. Among ordinary people with extraordinary spirit. When he looked at India, he did not see votes. He saw values. He saw a civilization that had been taught to doubt its own greatness. A generation taught to see faith as weakness and pride as arrogance. And he decided to change that mindset, not by force, but by awakening. He asked a simple question: can a nation truly rise if its people have forgotten who they are? That question became his mission. Because identity is power, and power, when guided by purpose, becomes progress. When Modi speaks of Hindutva, he does not speak of rituals. He speaks of responsibility to serve, to protect, to uplift. It is a call not to rule, but to reform, not to dominate, but to discipline. For him, Hindu is not a label. It is a lifestyle. It means humility in success, patience in struggle, courage in crisis. It means believing in the eternal truth that all paths lead to one light, and that every human carries a spark of divinity. This is why his speeches move beyond politics. They touch something older, deeper, and more powerful, the spiritual DNA of India. He often reminds the youth that you are not born to live a small life. You are born to live a meaningful one. That message carries the soul of the Bhagavad Gita, not the language of propaganda. It says, do your duty, believe in yourself, and serve without fear. That's not religion. That's a mindset of warriors People who build, not break. In Modi's Hindu Rashtra, a temple is not just a place of worship. It is a symbol of focus. A mosque is not just a structure. It is a space of surrender. And every citizen, regardless of faith, becomes part of a single mission: to make India rise as one. He does not preach exclusion. He preaches excellence. He does not call for conflict. He calls for character, because he believes that India will not change by arguments. It will change by attitude. And attitude comes from awareness. The awareness that this land is not a random collection of states. It is a living soul that breathes through its people. When he talks about development, he links it with devotion. When he talks about economy, he connects it with ethics. When he talks about power, he ties it to purpose. This is how faith becomes fuel and politics becomes service. That is Modi's art. He doesn't separate the divine from the daily. He merges spiritual discipline with practical leadership. To him, yoga and technology, temples and startups, Bhagavad Gita and global goals all belong in the same sentence, because one teaches balance and the other demands vision. That's after independence. And perhaps that is why people follow him with emotion. Not because of slogans, but because they feel he believes what he says. There is conviction in his calm and fire in his faith. He reminds India that spirituality is not escape. It is empowerment. It gives a man the courage to stand when everything pushes him down. It gives a nation the power to rise when the world counts it out. That is why he tells the youth again and again, do not wait for miracles. Become one. Because for Modi, the true Hindu Rashtra is not built in the streets. It is built in the spirit. It begins when every Indian says, I am responsible. I am disciplined. I am proud. That is how religion turns into revolution. That is how faith becomes foundation. And that is how one man's vision starts to shape 1 billion dreams. Every great nation fights two kinds of battles. One against its enemies, and one within its own mind. The second one decides everything. Modi understands this better than most. He often says, India's biggest challenge is not poverty, but the poverty of confidence. But the poverty of confidence, and he's right, the mind is the battlefield of destiny. For decades, India looked outward for inspiration. We admired other nations, other systems, other heroes. But Modi came and said, The light you are looking for is already within you. That line changed something. He reminded people that faith is not weakness. Faith is fuel. It gives you focus when the world doubts you. It gives you courage when the road is dark. And it gives you peace when power tests your soul. In his vision of a new India, faith is not about who you pray to. It's about what you believe you can become. That is why his speeches always circle back to mindset. Because he knows that an undisciplined mind cannot build a disciplined nation. He says, change your thinking, and 1.4 billion people will change the course of history. It sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. Because once a citizen begins to believe, truly believe, that he is responsible for the nation's future, everything changes. Corruption becomes shameful. Laziness becomes a sin. Service becomes pride. That's the faith Modi wants to awaken. Not just in temples or mosques, but in homes, classrooms, and offices. A faith in discipline, devotion, and duty. He often recalls the story of Swami Vivekananda, who said, "Give me 100 youth of conviction, and I will transform India." Modi took that as a challenge and turned it into policy. Every initiative from Make in India to Digital India carries that same invisible heartbeat. Believe in yourself. Build your nation. To him, Hindutva is not an ideology to divide. It's a reminder to rise. It means living with purpose. That is how we achieve our freedom. Working with honesty and serving with compassion. It's about character, not creed. It's about courage, not conflict. And the biggest transformation he brought was this. He replaced the language of fear with the language of faith. Earlier, people said, "Can we do it?" Now they say, "Why we'll do it?" That's not politics. That's a psychological revolution. Because when 1.4 billion minds start thinking like builders instead of beggars, no power on earth can stop them. Modi often tells the youth, do not compete with others. Compete with your own potential. That is the battle of mindset. The lazy blames. The leader builds. The weak complain. The wise create. He wants every Indian to become a warrior of change. Not with weapons, but with wisdom, willpower, and work. That is why he speaks again and again of discipline. Because without discipline, where freedom becomes chaos. Without focus, democracy becomes noise. And without faith, progress becomes hollow. Modi's Hindu Rashtra in its purest meaning, is a Rashtra of self-belief. A nation where citizens wake up every morning not asking, what will my country do for me? But declaring, what will I do for my country today? That mindset, that shift from dependency to destiny, is the real power he wants to unleash. He believes that if India's youth can conquer their own doubts, they can conquer the world. If they can master their own habits, they can master their own future. And if they can unite under values of discipline and devotion, then no divide, political or religious, can break them. That's why Modi's message is not just about religion. It's about revolution of thought. It's about waking up a sleeping civilization and reminding it of its eternal strength. Because when a nation's people truly believe in their own potential, they stop waiting for miracles. They become the miracle. That cannot be broken. In the end, every great journey comes down to one question: did we rise, or did we just exist? When history looks back at our time, it will not count our buildings or our battles. It will remember our belief, because belief is what built this civilization. It is what carried India through centuries of challenge and change. And it is what Narendra Modi calls the soul of a nation, the spirit that cannot be broken. For him, the dream of a Hindu Rashtra was never about temples or titles. It was about transformation, after independence, about turning ordinary citizens into extraordinary servants of the nation. That after independence, about reminding 1.4 billion people that destiny does not belong to those who wait. It belongs to those who work, who serve, who rise. He tells the youth, the world will respect India only when India starts respecting itself. That is not arrogance. That is awareness. That is not pride. That is purpose. He believes that India's true strength lies not in its politics, but in its people. The farmer in the field, the soldier at the border, the teacher in the classroom, the mother who teaches her child to dream. They are the real builders of this Rashtra. And what connects them is not religion. It is responsibility. It is discipline. It is devotion. That is why Modi's vision is not a wall. It is a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern will, between spirituality and science, between the idea of faith and the action of freedom. He says, we cannot move forward by denying who we are. We move forward by discovering who we can become. That is the message of his leadership. Not to divide hearts, but to ignite them. Not to silence differences, but to turn diversity into strength. Because true nationalism is not about hating others. It is about loving your country enough to serve it, shape it, and strengthen it. The vision of a Hindu Rashtra in its purest sense is a call to rise above fear, above politics, above the narrow lines of religion, and to stand as one people under one purpose, to make India eternal, a nation rooted in faith, guided by reason, driven by courage, and united by compassion. That is the India Modi dreams of, an India that can face the storms of the world and still stand tall. An India that teaches the world that strength and spirituality can walk hand in hand. An India that shows what happens when belief becomes action and action becomes legacy. So, my friends, the question is no longer religion or politics. The real question is, will we rise with belief or fall with doubt? Because the destiny of this country is not written in the stars. It is written in the hands of those who dare to serve it. Stand up, work hard, stay united, keep faith, and remember what Modi always says: when 1.4 billion Indians decide to move, the world has no choice but to follow. That is not just a quote. It is a prophecy. It is the heartbeat of a rising nation. It is the promise of a civilization that refuses to fade. So let this not end as a speech. Let it begin as a movement. Let every Indian, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, rise together, shoulder to shoulder, as children of one Bharat. A Bharat that believes, a Bharat that builds, a Bharat that leads. Because when India rises with faith and discipline, the whole world feels the light. Jai Hind.